Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Johnson, and we're going to be talking about efforts for counseling through the lifespan. By the end of this unit, you should be able to identify effective counseling and educational strategies depending on your client's life stage. Educational approaches should be very different when you are working with an infant compared to working with an elderly adult. You should be able to apply these principles and develop appropriate educational materials as part of a case study that is due at the end of the week. So I want you to think about, for a pregnant woman, what should the nutrition professional consider when working with them, either counseling or providing nutrition education? For pregnant women, education should focus primarily on proper weight gain patterns. It's important to note that no matter what weight the mom is, she needs to be gaining some sort of weight. Now, if a mom goes into a pregnancy and she's overweight to begin with, she's not going to have to gain as much weight compared to a mother who is underweight when she becomes pregnant. No matter what, though, a pregnant woman should not be losing weight. She should be gaining some weight because that shows us that the baby is growing. We also want to make sure that we can educate on proper foods to promote fetal growth, such as foods that are rich in folate, calcium, and iron. So, what should you consider when you are trying to do education or counseling with a pregnant or even a preconception woman? So, there's a lot of people who struggle with fertility issues, and preconception, so before you get pregnant, is becoming a popular area for nutrition education and counseling. According to learning theories, pregnant women prefer group classes and understanding peer involvement. They really like to have their husbands and partners involved because they're going to be their support system that can keep them accountable for incorporating these healthy, nutrient dense foods to help them grow a healthy baby. We also want to create a healthy environment that can be sustainable. Oftentimes, moms are so stressed out because now they're growing a little baby in their belly that they get overwhelmed by all the nutrient dense foods that incorporate into their diet to help grow that baby. It's important to help them understand that it's not about perfection, it's about sustainability. What about infants through 2 years of age? What should the nutrition professional consider when we're looking at nutrients that are important, and then as well as counseling or educational strategies? Infants to 2 years is a critical growth period. In the first year of life, infants are going to triple their weight and double their height. That's an enormous amount of growth. They have the fastest metabolism rate of any lifespan, and it's really important that we can start to incorporate complementary foods around 4 to 6 months, focusing on iron rich foods, pureed vegetables, pureed fruit, and then ultimately minced meats. One thing that's new is that we want to incorporate those high allergen foods earlier. They used to say don't add any type of fish products or shrimp until the age of 3, but now they're saying the earlier you incorporate it, then the better off they are and not likely to develop a food allergen. So, food is going to look very different during this lifespan because they move from having primarily liquids such as breast milk or formula to then introducing those complementary foods and then ultimately self-feeding once they get those pincher grasp down. Another area that you might want to look into is a thing that's called baby-led weaning. This is a popular new area of research that's been really important for the development of the baby. What about preschoolers? How can we help educate the preschoolers? So, education should primarily be focused on promoting a healthy growth and development and learning fun food behaviors. This is an appropriate time for them to play with food, and a lot of times people are scared to let the kids in the kitchen. It's important that we use age appropriate techniques, such as cutting things with a plastic knife when they're younger, to maybe even stirring or mixing when they're about 5 years old. Food habits are learned through family and education, so it's really important to get them in the kitchen. I should note too, it's also an important area if we can incorporate family into this because ultimately the family is responsible for the meals that are provided to the preschoolers at home. One thing to note is that preschoolers like familiar foods. They rely on visual and physical concepts of foods, and introducing new foods can be really scary. One thing that you can do is introduce new foods when the child is first hungry, as well as getting them that exposure or sensory integration can be an innovative and positive way when introducing new foods. Don't be afraid to continue to try to introduce those new foods as well. It can be a bit overwhelming for the provider and the caretaker of that child, but multiple exposures will ultimately let the kid come around and try that food. Making food fun is another way too, like this skeleton vegetable man. Always let them be part of the fun. This was my niece when she was, probably 3 or 4 years old, and she's now 11, and she's always been in the kitchen cooking with me. And that's a memory that she absolutely loves. And she is one of the healthiest eaters that I know, but she also is a girl after my own heart and loves those sweets too. So, counseling strategies should really be focused on the parents, especially with the infants, too. I didn't mention that earlier. We want to make sure that we can help support that parent. And because they are the provider, one of the ways that we need to work with the parents is by collecting information to do an assessment. So, we're going to have to ask the parents to take a food record or a food journal, and really they need to write down, even if the child only has one tiny bite, because all of that is going to then impact their overall nutrient intake. We also need to encourage parents to offer a variety of food choices, which can be overwhelming, but we can provide some resources to help them be more successful. We always want to allow the child to choose the quantity and frequency, with some exceptions. Maybe some of you have heard about Ellen Sater. Ellen Sater is the guru in feeding your child not too little and not too much. She has this principle called the division of responsibility, where essentially the parent is responsible for providing the food and the child gets to choose which foods that they will or will not consume. Some other fun little strategies to get kids more excited about food are action stories, songs, videotapes, tasting parties, gardens, puzzles, and art projects. They can even do a food journal with drawings and pictures. If you want to click on that link, it's a funny little video that talks about the alphabet and different fruits and vegetables. So, what about school age, 6 to 12? What should the nutrition professional consider? Education should be focused primarily on how to select healthy options to provide that ultimate growth. Because their bodies are still growing, it's important to get those essential nutrients, such as calcium, to maintain that proper bone function. We also want to help them develop skills and understand nutrition information so they can start learning about carbohydrates, proteins, fats, fruits, vegetables, and all the healthy nutrients such as calcium. Always getting the child involved is important as well. We want to make sure that we are able to understand the child's social, physical, and psychological environments as well. These are when messages such as you need to suck in your tummy or make sure you don't eat all that cookie because it's bad for you are languages that we really want to encourage the parent not to use. We want to make sure that we're not labeling foods as good and bad because kids are soaking this in and will start to develop a relationship with food through this age. So, some counseling strategies for this group. We want to make sure that we can address some of the challenges. During this life stage, making time for breakfast is very challenging as we're trying to rush out the door to get to school on time. After school snacks are an important area to make sure that we can get in the nutrients required for growth. And physical activity is an important component where we should get 60 minutes of play per day. These are areas that we want to try to address and decrease the barriers to accomplishing those three aspects. And as always, learning should be fun, and so we want to create activities and maybe homework assignments for them that are involved with learning as being fun around food. Some things that they can do are measuring, hands-on activities, or even oral activities such as describing their favorite foods and why, and then looking at how those nutrients can be beneficial. I know my niece right now is making these TikTok videos, which could be another aspect that they're able to accomplish. What about adolescents, 13 to 19? What should the nutrition professional consider? Education should be focused primarily on incorporating healthy eating behaviors based off their lifestyle. Some teens are going to be involved in sports while others will not. We also want to address complications about dieting and calorie restriction, specifically for females, because this is when those eating disorders can start to heavily develop. One thing to note too is at this stage, nutrient differences are going to occur between the female and male. Once the female starts her menstrual cycle, her iron needs sharply increase compared to her peer male. And this is an important thing because typically women are underfueling their bodies, which means they're not meeting their iron requirement and they can feel lethargic and fatigued frequently. We can help address these by providing education about food as being fuel. And one thing to consider is who is the most influential about their food choices during this life stage. Social norms play a big role, especially with the push of social media. So, counseling strategies really are going to focus on the cognitive behavioral therapy, where we change the mindset about how thoughts affect feelings, feelings affect thoughts, thoughts affect food behaviors affect thoughts, and so forth, right? I hope you remember that triangle when we looked at the cognitive theory. This really is going to take a group effort as well because of the social norms. They feel peer pressure to fit in, so they're going to follow that social norm. So it's important that we can provide group activities that focus on changing the cognitive behaviors. And lastly, let's look at the elderly population. The folks that are over 65, what should we consider as nutrition professionals? Education should focus primarily on improving the quality of life. It's most likely that these elderly group of people are going to have multiple medications as well as one or more chronic disease. Therefore, it's important that we can improve the quality of life and especially maintain their daily activities of life. Things like going to the bathroom, feeding themselves, and so forth are an important aspect for their overall health and quality. Counseling strategies should focus primarily on looking at medical conditions, so focusing on the medical nutrition therapy aspect for those that are going on to become a dietitian, and living arrangements such as social environments. Do they live alone? Do they have adequate access to food? Is another important counseling strategy to focus on. Oftentimes, this group don't like to admit when the fact that they are food insecure, so we want to make sure that we can address that and provide programs available such as Meals on Wheels. Finances play another role as well, especially considering our state of the world right now. These are all important strategies that sometimes are not fun to talk about, but definitely important to let them know that as the nutrition professional, we can help address these issues. So, in summary, you can see that there are different educational needs for the different lifespans and that we need to tailor our approach based off of the age group. There are different nutrients that are required for these various life stages, as well as some different techniques that we can use. As always, it's important to build that rapport and let them know that we're their coach and we're here for them and helping them on their journey to improve their quality of life.